Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. This is episode 25 and the first of 2014, so Happy New Year. Joining me in this episode once again is Jason Ryan, who actually will be a longtime friend of our guest tonight. Jay?
Yeah, Eamonn Butler, I have to say, was sort of one of these guys that was legendary, back in Ireland, because I first heard his name from my first animation instructor, Larry Laurier, back in Dunleary Art College. And he was in contact with Eamonn, and Eamonn was working as a feature animator in London at the time, working on FRO 7, this Detective Frog feature, which was kind of funny. I mean, it was a funny show. It wasn't the greatest quality in the world, but I have to say, Eamonn's sequence was definitely the highlight of the show. You could tell it was like, whoa, there's Disney style animation, and he sent his work, kind of printouts of his work, of this hyena sequence, back to Ireland, back to Larry Laurier, who kind of showed us his stuff and said, this is feature quality animation. And I always kind of looked up to Eamonn, and then Eamonn came back to Ireland to teach, and he actually taught in Dunleary Art College. He wasn't actually teaching our particular year. He was teaching the foundation year kind of animation while I was in second year, but I was always talking to him and showing him my stuff, and he would show me his stuff, and it was fantastic. I mean, just the quality of his animation was far and beyond any skills that we actually had in Ireland at the time.
That's great.
So it was one of those guys that knew every trick in the book. If you asked him a question about how to do something, if he didn't know about it, he would go and research it and then tell you the following day how to do it.
And he's the one who actually got you over here to the States, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was Doug Bennett who first got hired by Disney. Doug actually gave Eamonn's name to Hendel Butoy, the director of Fantasia, and then when Eamonn got in contact with Hendel, he actually gave Hendel my name. So we both basically got hired within the first week. We were hired on the same day, basically.
Well, I'm looking forward to pulling him on. It sounds like he's got a great wealth of experience and obviously a very talented artist. So let's bring him on.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for setting this up, Jay and Larry.
Yeah, no worries. No.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for spending the time, man.
No problem.
Yeah, I saw your guys', and we'll get into your short beans, but I'd seen that and just got a kick out of it. And then I saw your name on there, and I right away just shot it over to Jason. He's like, "Oh yeah, I already saw it," and sent him over an email. So I said, "Hey, would you think he'd be up for a podcast?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's give him a shot." So
yeah, cool. I'm always up for that stuff. I haven't done one of these in years.
I got since Vacatus, right?
The one that you did with him was in 2006, so I think you're due for a new podcast. So I appreciate you joining us.
No problem.
So yeah, first of all, I just really do appreciate you joining us. We get a lot of compliments. It's been really cool getting the feedback on the podcast. And I know it's not because they want to hear me, they want to hear you guys. And so we appreciate you joining us and again and having a great guest on here. So thanks for your time.
No problem. Me and Jay go way back, and I'm always happy to support him any way I can.
Yeah. I think the first time I knew about Eamonn was back when I was in college, in Dunleary Art College. And my first animation instructor, Larry Laurier, had been in contact with Eamonn, because he was in London working on FRO 7.
Yeah.
And that was was it a Detective Frog or something?
Yeah, it was a weird 2D film. By all rights, it should never have gotten made. But it was. But I learned a lot working on it. I got to work with some great artists. The movie didn't turn out too great, but you got to start somewhere. But I think I was just I left the same school as you, basically just a year ahead of you. Wasn't that it?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It was originally a 1-year program, right? Yeah.
David Brain, who's ex-Disney, he worked on The Black Cauldron. He goes way back. He was sent over to Dublin to do to set up a training course to put together a team of animators at the time to support a potential Dublin-based Disney TV studio. And this was when we had Disney had a studio in Paris and another one over in London. And I think they were doing the DuckTales TV series and sort of videos, straight to video stuff. So the Dublin studio was going to go ahead, and David came over and picked I think it was about 12 of us, and we did an intensive sort of 1-year gig. just drawing every day, animating in between, everything,
That's
all the
awesome.
basics. And then they pulled the London studio got shut, and then they decided to pull the Dublin studio before it got started. They kept the Disney one in Paris, which then switched over back to, or it reverted back to the Brizzi brothers who were running it as a Disney studio, and then it became the Brizzi studio. And then eventually they hooked up with Disney again years later to do Tarzan. But yeah, it was really. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better training.
As I say, you got your training in before it shut down. Then.
Yeah, yeah. And then my first gig was getting started as an in-betweener at Murakami Wolf doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the TV show.
Oh, nice.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And not a lot of people know. Like half that show was done in Korea, and the other half was done in Dublin.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I used to
and
watch that show.
yeah. I mean, I used to love it, and then
Yeah.
getting a chance to work on it was great. So yeah, so that was good grounding. At the time, with all due respect to the studio, I felt like I needed to reach a bit higher, and I wanted to try for features, and they weren't doing features; they were doing TV at the time. Nobody else was doing features other than Bluth, and they were on the decline, so they'd stopped kind of hiring, and there was a lot of talk around town that they weren't doing so well. So I applied there, but didn't get in, and then I went to I basically, it's a long story, but I sold all my stuff. I didn't have much stuff left, and I bought a ticket to London and flew into London with a portfolio and literally just knocked on doors. And I came back the same day, flew back that evening with two job offers, and one of those was the Freddy movie. So I handed in my notice and moved over to London, and that was sort of the beginning of it. I met my wife
What
there.
was the name of that company, Eamon?
It was Hollywood Road Film Productions.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
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 They went on to start making a sequel, but I don't think it took off. They didn't get to finish it. But I learned quite a lot, and I became an animator there. Did a test, worked hard, and then I think it was like a year later after that show we did that game. I just 2D was sort of the writing was on the wall for 2D animation. At least I could see it, and I thought, I wouldn't mind trying computers. I was kind of interested at the time, but there were no courses. There was nowhere you could go and do what Jason does. You couldn't learn from a master. There's just nobody around to learn from, and you had to kind of do it yourself. So a friend of mine called up. Do you remember Alan?
Yeah. Yep. French
Yeah.
guy.
So he
Yeah.
was making a game called Ecstatica, which is quite a famous game actually. It was the first game to use this ellipsoid technology. And he was finishing that game, and he was moving on to a second game, and he said he needed help. So I came in, and it was me, him, my wife Kirsten, and the programmer, and that was it. And it was great. And then as we grew, we needed extra help, and that's when we called Jay, and we got a couple other guys over, and we started building it.
Now, is this the
Um,
same guy that made his own software?
he did,
That's right.
The
Yeah. His
animation
own
software?
animation software, right?
yeah. I mean, it was basic, but I mean, I've yet to see a package that would let you do that quickly.
That's what
It was
Jason's
unbelievable.
mentioned.
You could almost. I mean, you could animate pretty much like as the animation is playing back.
It was real time.
So if you're like, for example, like if you're doing a walk cycle and you say, he needs more ups and downs, you could literally drag it as it's playing and see it
Yeah.
actually happen. It was
Yeah, it was
crazy.
incredible piece of technology. But and it was learning the hard way. You had to just jump in and do it. And we did a little bit of everything really. We kind of modeled a little bit and rigged a bit in a fairly basic way and animated. But it was great because it was a small team, so it was quite rewarding creatively because you got to dip your toe in a lot of different disciplines. But then Disney were traveling the world looking for 2D animators that wanted to work in 3D. And they were sort of on this worldwide recruiting thing. And I got recommended by, I think it was Doug Bennett, passed on my name. And then I made a connection with Disney. And then I passed on Jason's name. And then so basically both started within a few weeks of each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had our first podcast actually was with Doug.
Doug's great
Yeah, he's a
animator.
great guy.
And the
That's
first
right.
show we worked on
That's
was
amazing.
Tin Soldier, right?
That's right. That was great fun, actually. Man, we were blessed. There was only like, what, 7 of us on the team? It was tiny.
7 animators.
Yeah, 7 or 10 in this tiny little place. They turned it into the ARL, I think, years later. And
The
it was
animation research library. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was sort of halfway between the Disney main feature building and DreamWorks, and it was on Flower Street, and it was this rundown building, and the carpet was all rooked up, but it was great. It was a real sort of strong sort of team spirit, and we kind of left alone to get on with it. We had a good time.
Now, how did you feel coming in over from working on that stuff to this as being your first feature?
I was terrified, to be honest. I mean, you walk the halls of Disney and any of the big studios, obviously, and you see nothing but incredible artwork. And particularly Disney, you see all these films that have gone back 50, 60 years
Hmm.
and more even. And it's quite intimidating, actually. You feel like you have to live up to that, but it's kind of inspiring. And Glenn's right there, and at the time you had Nick, and you got all these big names just
Eric,
sort of
yeah,
in offices doing their thing. It was
Do-
kind of cool.
Eric Goldberg. I mean, all
Yeah,
the greats were there. And then they
yeah,
had these chalk talks like they were going on as well, where these great animators would come in and, talk about how they approach shots, and how they approach animation. That was great. Amazing.
Now, were you
yeah.
guys assigned any mentor or anything along that lines when you guys first got there?
Thrown in the deep end, yeah.
Yeah, we were thrown in the deep end. At the time, it was so interesting. Not many 2D guys that were already there wanted to work in CG.
Mm.
And I think politically, it was an interesting thing. Disney used CG to do things that would be really laborious to do in 2D. So crowd scenes, like all the horses in Mulan, and the CG was great in those sequences for the time. But the perception was that CG was there. CG animation was kind of like caps. It was just taking a laborious job and making it, less laborious, really.
Okay.
Um, and we kept pushing for, doing more and more full CG stuff. And the door was open to bring, we really wanted to get the 2D guys over. All that amazing experience would have been great because most of us were, we had animation experience. We were still kind of trying to find our way. We were literally kind of defining workflows in those first few years. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny because the 2D workflow has ended up being kind of the best workflow, really. I think Jay is a great example of that. All the stuff that he teaches is amazing. There is no better workflow, really, than to start with sketching and thumbnailing and blocking it out in 2D.
Yeah.
It's the leanest way to work. And it's still the leanest way to work. So, the principles are the principles. They haven't changed. It just happens to be that, we were using a piece of technology instead of a pencil.
Hmm. So there were 7 of you guys that were just on the CG portion of Fantasia 2000.
Yeah.
Well, it was Tin Soldier. Yeah,
On
not
Tin
not
Soldier,
just
yeah. They did kind of like
yeah.
one sequence at a time.
Mm.
So it took quite a few years actually to do Fantasia 2000. But you had there was Jay, myself, and Doug. I think we were the only sort of guys from 2D as a background. Everybody else, all the other animators were CG animators, but it was quite collaborative. They'd help us out, learning how to use stuff, and they showed us tips, and we were showing them what we knew from 2D,
Mm.
and then it started. What's nice about it is it started to influence the rigging, which showed up. We did amazing things over the years, particularly kind of towards Chicken Little, and I think it's kind of influenced quite a lot of stuff in the industry, mainly just by doing stuff that CG guys don't. I mean, on the technical side, the engineers at the time, the riggers, didn't like the idea of breaking rigs, and it was a difficult thing to get through, but on Chicken, we had like major breakthroughs there where I kept saying, look, just make it so that they can do anything.
Yeah.
And they're responsible, let them do it. And everybody was really tentative and there was a lot of nail biting. I'm like, look, just let them do it. And we gave this scene to, you remember Brian Ferguson, Jay?
Yep.
And he did
Yeah,
that sort of,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, he did a scene.
The
And this
baseball
is a
club.
guy that was, he just learned CG. And he did this incredible thing, and he completely wrecked the rig, but it looked incredible. It looked absolutely incredible. And Ramiro, I think, was our head of rigging at the time. He went, right, that's it. I get it now.
Uh,
Now it looks great, and we'll just figure out ways to unbreak it. And then, but it's so worth doing when you have really great, talented animators who are not afraid of it and don't have any baggage with it, and they'll push it really hard. Then, and that's what happened on that show.
That particular shot was the stork.
That's
in the
right.
baseball game throwing a screwball, and his
Yeah.
legs just kind of went all the way around his body,
Yeah.
And it was a very, very 2D style, action, which it never really been done in CG before. So it was like, holy crap, how did he do that? And he basically animated on ones, breaking it down so much that it turned into a 2D shot,
Yeah.
It was awesome.
it seems like there's kind of been a little bit more of a pendulum swing back to some of that. I know with like Tangled and Glenn's influence on there. taking and pushing a lot of the CG into a more of a 2D kind of feel and look. It seems like we're kind of moving back more to that and being able to take this rich history of 2D and bring it back into CG.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll swing back another way again until it finds its place. I mean, you know, Glenn, you know, God bless him, back when Tangled was Rapunzel, you know, he wanted to do that as a 2D film originally, and then the studio had felt like, no, no, we'll let you do it, but it's got to be CG. And he kind of resisted it for a bit, and then he kind of relaxed. But it took a while, and I think, you know, one of the great things about Disney is they've always had, you know, great support for rigging and technology and giving the animators the tools they need. I mean, I've never experienced it since then. I'm sure DreamWorks has a great reputation for it as well, but it's they're really committed to sculpting characters, not just moving skeletons around. And that's really what you're seeing is Glenn's eye, not just for 2D, but for sculpting, for shape and form and rhythm and all this gorgeous stuff that you see in his drawings. And it's a major leap forward. But I think making it look exactly like 2D is sort of, why do that, you know? I'm dying to see what happens in the next 10 years. Yeah.
And that actually kind of brings up to a question. I posted this on our members community section, and this is from Nicolette Kiss, and she says, as someone who's been in the animation industry for quite some time and experienced some of the evolutions, she gets kind of a two question here. What kind of changes do you see coming to animation in the future, and what qualities do you think animators need to maintain longevity in this ever-changing field?
I think that the tools might change. You know, they're going to evolve. Things like Maya, you know, any custom stuff that studios run, they'll constantly develop, and you just have to stay on top of that. You're always learning new stuff. But workflow is really the key. I mean, you've got to root that in some solid ground. And what Jay teaches is, like I said, it's probably the best workflow out there because it's doable. Anyone can do that, and you don't need fancy software to do it. It's just discipline. And the discipline is the key to getting your bad ideas out of your head by sketching quickly. Too many people in CG work, you know, polish the first pass, particularly in the visual effects world. And that's largely to do with the fact that they overwork something or they work things up too much. And by doing that, you invest a lot of time in something, and then you're less likely to want to throw it away when that's exactly what you should do. But when you're sketching, you know, and it's stick figures or bouncing ball style stuff, then you're not invested too much in it, you know, and you can try different ideas out quickly before you commit to pushing something around in CG, because that's where you have to take time. And there's a lot of limitations still, you know, technical things like flipping and, you know, all this stupid stuff you have to deal with, but it's real world stuff. I think we're going to see a lot more interesting stylization as photorealism starts to turn towards abstract design, but still feeling tangible. And I think movies like Tangled, for example, they have a very 2D look, but they don't feel like like they're real, like they're solid and in front of you. And I think the future is going to be full of movies that are combinations of live action elements as well as digital characters. You know, the kind of thing that, like Avatar, to me was basically an animated film with little bits of live action at the start and end, but the rest of it is all CG. And yet people don't even think of it like that. They think it was all live action with a few CG characters put in, but it's not. And I think there's a huge world to be plundered that breaks the mold and the expectation that audiences have when you say, oh, it's an animated film. And I think the industry is sort of guilty of creating its own market with limitations. So when people hear, oh, it's animated, they think it's a family film or it's a kid's film. And they kind of bracket it before they've given the film a chance. So I think breaking that mold is really important. And I think CG lets us do that because you can do so many different things with it. But I'd like to see more artistry involved and less reliance on technology. I think the technology kicks the crap out of the heart of a story, or, you know, it doesn't always, all that time and effort doesn't always make it on the screen. You need it, but there's got to be, you know, you can win people's hearts with a well-told story, and you can manipulate them in other ways. It doesn't have to be all about pushing pixels around. And I think there's always a danger with stuff, particularly in my work, because I work in visual effects primarily now. And it's all about technology, and it's all about being the first at something. or doing something crazier than the last guy that did it, you know. And that's still quite prevalent in the industry. And to me, it's like it gets to the point where people check out. You know, they go, oh, here's the big effect scene, or here's something that couldn't possibly be real. You know, 10,000 soldiers on a beach with a camera move that couldn't possibly be. And they know people's visual acuity and their sense of what's real is incredibly strong, even though they may not be able to express it in technical terms. People know when something doesn't look right. And it's harder. It's getting harder and harder to fool people. But I think a bit less extravagance in films and a bit more heart would go a longer way, you know. And I see that being coming through in character animation in particular. And I think the future is for CG and for feature animation. It's definitely still in character and acting and performance. But I see, you know, other things going on. Like I was really impressed with Rango. You know, visually I thought incredible. I love the look of it. And I thought, great, somebody's breaking the mold, trying something different.
A little bit even like Secret of Nim, you know?
Yeah.
Where it was kind of that.
It's different.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, so. And it opened people's minds up to, you know, different types of storytelling within that medium. And I think it's exactly the same thing. So I think that'll happen. I think you got to hang on to your craft, though, and always keep working on polishing it. And don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because, you know, let's say you're working in features today, but next year you want to move somewhere or you want to try a visual effects type film. Don't give up the stuff that works. That will carry you through your whole career. The stuff you learn from all the guys at iAnimate is priceless. You just, you know, that's your foundation for having a great career. And no matter what anybody says, don't throw it away because that's what helps you, you know, get past the basics and into actually delivering a good performance.
How did you develop your workflow?
Kind of trial and error, really. I can draw. You know, I'm not too bad at drawing. It's not. I'd say that's not second nature to me, and I have to work at it. But I can do it, and it's. But the thing I still struggle with is overworking an idea.
Okay.
So my sort of, if I think back through my path, I tend to abandon stuff. And I'll go for a walk, you know, if I'm not getting somewhere, I'll walk away from it, and I'll come at it from a completely different angle, even if I don't believe it's going to work. I'll just try it. And it's sort of the discipline of saying, okay, don't overworking something is just the worst thing you can do. You'll just kick the crap out of the idea, or it won't be fresh and you won't be into it anymore. You have to have a connection to it, and then spot that element that works, and then hang everything off of it, and just sort of learn to commit. And I think one of the hardest things to learn in my career has been being able to look at your own work and go, yeah, that works, or that doesn't work. That takes ages to learn, I think. And some people get it way earlier. I think Jay got that right from the very beginning. He can look at his own work and know. What? Why are you laughing?
I'm always saying, like, I'm blind to my own work as well. You know, it's like it's only maybe 4 or 5 times in my life have I ever kind of looked at something and go, oh yeah, that's working, that's great, okay, cool. You know,
I think you're not doing yourself a favor there. I mean, of all the animators I've known, you know when you've pushed an idea to a point and it's working technically and it's doing its job, and then you move on to the next phase, and you know how to do that. And most people can't even get to that place, and for years. I remember working with Nick. Remember Nick Ranieri?
Yeah.
Never had any confidence in his stuff, but it always looked amazing.
Right, right.
It's something every artist wrestles with to varying extents, you know.
I had a theory about Nick and some of the. I mean, he was one of these 2D guys, Nick Ranieri, who basically did all their own in betweens. You know, he never had any confidence at any stage, you know, after his animation phase. So he would control every arc, every sort of secondary action, everything that could be animated, he would control in his own 2D shots. And he had the same kind of thing with a CG. And that's why I think he transferred over so well into CG.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I know, Jason, you've mentioned here is, and I think, Eamon, I was listening to the animation podcast that you did, and you mentioned that that's kind of why you enjoy working in linear as well, because you weren't letting the computer dictate how you get your arcs and overshoots and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm comfortable working in any curve type really because I can predict it now. Mm-hmm. I've gotten to know it, but in the beginning, I think it's important not to let the computer make any pseudo creative decisions for you because they're not creative. They're just smoothing.
Accidents. Yeah, they're happy
Exactly.
accidents, really. You know.
And what happens is when you see something in betweening smoothly with a little bit of a cushion and somewhere in it, you get romanced by that and you think, wow, wow, that's amazing. Look what I did. And then it stops you making timing choices. And I think, the computer will give you timing choices that are just not particularly aggressive, and not particularly, everything will move more or less in the same way. So and you won't learn if you do that, especially in the early part of your career. So I tell people work linearly, and then let's say you have a keyframe on frame 1 and your next pose is frame 12. Then, if I want to put a favor in, I can play, I can let it animate linearly, and it's completely predictable at that point. I know exactly what it's going to do. So I can take my value at frame 3, middle mouse that over, like drag it across and drop it at 6, which, I've now created a cushion into 12. So, but I've decided what the value is and where it lands in the timeline. But if you just let it in between on splines, it's going to give you some kind of wacky value that won't necessarily be the one that you want. So, and I learned this. I remember I worked on a TV show, a French TV show, and I had to work from home for about a month, and I had no line tester, so I did everything straight, drawings and charts, and I never got to see it until I ended up in the TV show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it really forced me to really think hard about my timing and make sure it worked. And it worked. And, but on the computer, you take that ability away from people and you can really see who knows what timing is. But I like to understand the value of a single frame, because it can make a huge difference for a subtle piece of acting or a blink or a move or something like that. But I think you've got to know timing and values, like moving values around. But try to make those decisions yourself early in your career and learn it and understand it. Then later on, when you're comfortable, use whatever curves you like. But I think it's important in the early days to try to understand how all that feels and make the creative decisions yourself.
To learn that, and like you said there, you feel comfortable jumping into these other curves, but it's because you've had that background of learning.
I've got plenty of experience now, so I know they're predictable to me. But generally, if I'm doing something small, I will still, it's every show I've been on, I've switched curve types over to linear. So I can move values around and drop in favors myself, or breakdowns, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, 2D is linear. If you think about it, like you're literally drawing every arc or every favor or every slow in, slow out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, if you just had your pose at 1 and your next pose at 12 and you charted it evenly, you gave that to an in-betweener, they would have exactly the same result as what the computer has, until you say, well, no, I want this arc up here and I want the favor to be here, and then chart it so that like the timing is there, then you're going to get the result you want, So it definitely, our 2D foundation definitely helped our transition into the computer in that way.
The other thing, another reason for it as well is when you're learning CG for the first time, what I used to tell people was, don't touch the graph editor until the very end, and all you're going to do then is make sure you don't have any overshoots, and you're not going to add any curves. You're just cleaning the curves so that there's nothing wacky going on that's going to blow out your motion blur, for example. And the reason for that is it's this juggling idea, right? So when you learn to animate, if you have to grab the controls, move them around, set keyframes, do some other stuff, and then get into your curves and start messing around, as soon as you open the curve editor, you start to kind of commit to motion, how things like translate from one position to another, rotate across varying degrees. But looking at a curve editor doesn't tell you jack, doesn't tell you anything. There's no emotion curve, there's no humor curve, there's no story curve. It's just data is all it is. And you could look at the best scene in the world and open up the editor, and you wouldn't know if it was good animation or not. It might look clean, but it wouldn't tell you anything about the quality of the animation. And it's juggling, and it romantic, it invites you in and goes, hey, play with me, look what you can do. You can do this, you can move my handles, you can blah, blah, blah. And then you're not in the scene anymore. You should just focus on posing, lines of action, all that stuff. The motion's the least of your concerns, for me anyway. I think in the early stages when you're trying to learn is stay away from it, because it romances you, brings you in, and stops you focusing on strengthening your poses and making strong creative decisions about what your breakdowns and your favors are going to be. And then at the end, look at your curves and fix them up. Yes, they might be a mess, but it's relatively straightforward to clean them. But if you start trying to juggle one and the other, it's really messy and difficult. And having said that, I've worked with animators that are completely comfortable in the graph editor and very fast and intuitive, and that's different. Those are people that are just au fait with that kind of way of seeing their work represented. But if you're more 2D oriented, I think it's just a bad thing. And don't worry if anybody yells at you for having dirty curves. It doesn't matter. As long as it renders properly.
That's right.
The curves aren't what it displays on the screen, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
No, this is great. What other advice do you usually give for students or people who are still earlier on in their career?
I think there's every student, and I've talked to hundreds of students, and I go and do talks in UK schools and Europe in general, and they all want to work, at Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney. They all want to work the big studios, and that's great. But take whatever you can to get started, but then keep aiming where you want to aim. But aim your real, and to get the job you really want. And if you end up in games, for example, or TV, or doing something interesting, but it's not exactly your dream, but you want to move to the next level, but your reel is all games work, then make sure that you push yourself hard in your own time and do something that shows people at the next level what they want to see. Because it's very, very competitive now. I think, 20 years ago, there wasn't that many people doing CG, and it was difficult to find people, but there's students out there in every country now learning it, and I think you've got to be diligent, push yourself hard, and make connections. It's amazing to. I do talks. This is this interesting thing. I'll do a talk, and I'll actually say in the talks, this is a great opportunity. You've got somebody in the industry right here doing a talk, me, right now, and I said it's great to come up and introduce yourself afterwards, because I'll remember you next time your reel comes in. It's a great talk. And guess how many people come up afterwards? Out of 200-300 people, maybe two. They're terrified. They're terrified. They don't want to say something dumb. They don't want to, look bad. I'm like, these are golden opportunities, And I guess you guys must do this as well all the time. But people just, they're scared to ask silly questions, and and it's a shame. But back in the day, Jay, you just couldn't get the kind of gold that you guys give away for free online. You know what I mean? The information, the experience, methodologies. You just couldn't get it back in the day. And I'm still amazed at when people show up, or a student will say, "Oh, where do I get a rig?" I'm like, "Do you have the internet, for Christ's sake? Just do a search." I mean, the internet didn't even exist when I was doing this. It just wasn't around. You had to make everything yourself. Like, you're blessed with all these resources. And it just comes down to whether you're disciplined or not to put the time and effort in to do something with it. But I just keep telling people, animation is just the tool towards telling a story. We're always serving the needs of a story, or the needs of a dramatic condition in a movie, or something that needs to move forward. And it's just a device. So how can you best serve that master? And I see people doing, just locomotion tests, and I hate the term locomotion test, because who cares, right? If I'm not being entertained, it's not a documentary we're going to be making here. It's a piece of entertainment. So do something that moves me in a way, or that connects with me, or makes me go, "Oh, I know that character," or "I felt like that," or "That's funny," or do something. But just moving things and saying, "Well, that's the way a real dog would walk." Like, I don't care. Why is it walking? Is it walking to something? Is it walking because it's afraid? Think of it like that, and then put that story in, and now you've got something that's worth watching. But I get a lot of that in the visual effects world. It's copying things and not understanding what the core idea was, or how to make it entertaining, or how to make it connect.
Right.
And that's really to me, it's that's what makes good animation stand out, is when you see a bit of story in there.
Yeah, it's true. It's like those locomotion tests. I mean, they might be accurate, accurate animation, but who cares? It's like, but that dog there, that's not real. I animated that. And you're like, I don't care. It's like, why'd you just shoot it live action then? It would have taken you 5 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tell me what it's doing, or give me an insight into how it feels, or tell a bit of a story with it. But it doesn't happen enough. And I think there's an awful lot of focus on the technology and using the tools, and not enough on simple stuff like storytelling and staging. In Europe, anyway, it's getting better. I will say the college is getting better over here, but yeah, that's sort of my take on that.
Mm. Yeah, I've shared this before on the podcast, so forgive me, anyone listening who've heard this before. But we had a chance to visit Jamal Bradley when he was still over at Disney, and he had this picture that I think he drew, and it was based upon a comment that he had heard from Glenn Keane, and I think Ollie Johnson or someone had told him this, and Glenn Keane showing Ollie his work, and he's like, yeah, it's good animation, but it doesn't entertain me, and that was the
Yeah,
point, was going, it looks good, but it doesn't do anything for me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, why would you want to watch it?
Yeah, yeah.
And equally, you got to think about that when you're building your reel as well. Put the stuff that's not just technical in there, but make sure it connects in some way and generates a response, because that's why we do it.
Mhm. Okay, well let's transition in then to your short beans, because we actually had a comment here from Frank, and I can't. Jay, you might have to help me with his last name, Gashk.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I
okay.
think so. Yeah, Australian guy, right?
Yeah, yeah, he's been one of our longtime members. But he says he thought it was a great video. He says, "Why are gags like this perpetually funny?" And so this was so this was what you're kind of talking about here. There was something that just resonates here.
Yeah,
And so let's see. His question is an animator regarded as a technician with the creativity confined to the director/storyboard shot? He says, or is a modern future animator a creative storyteller that needs filmmaking understanding to communicate the story?
I think the latter. I think it's filmmaker. You just happen to be making it using this particular wacky medium that we call animation. Um, that's the way I think. I mean, take all the technical crap away, and what have you got? Right? What have you got? If you're not doing something that people are interested in, other than your mom, because your mom will watch anything you make, right? Go, that's nice, son. Here's a cookie, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, why would anyone care? So I think you've got to be a filmmaker. Film is all about manipulation, right? You're always manipulating your audience, and making them take a journey. Hopefully, it's one they want to take, and then maybe challenging them, or surprising them, or exciting them, or scaring them, whatever you're going to do. But you're manipulating them, but nobody's going to watch your stuff just because you've spent years making it. It's got to have more to it than that, and you've got, that's the challenge. And with Beans, we set out. It was funny. The whole thing came about was I've been at Cinesite now for a year and a quarter, and when I joined, they'd been doing animation, but mostly filler stuff and visual effects, background stuff, naturalistic creature, digidoubles, that kind of thing, but no sort of showcase Ray Harryhausen front and center scene stealing stuff. And part of the challenge and sort of the curse, if you will, of CG and visual effects, or animation and visual effects, is I have to bid stuff, win that bid, make the stuff, do the shots, help make the film. When the film's done, it comes out, and sometimes I have to wait until it comes out on DVD before I can put that on my reel to win more work. Mm. And that can take a long time. And I thought, we'll do that anyway. But I set myself a challenge within the first year of updating the company's reel and making everybody sit up and take notice. And I said, right, we're going to do that in a year. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. So, I inherited a team, a really good team, a small team, and they're, technical guys that have been doing sort of realistic visual effects work. So I said, right, we'll keep it in that vein, because that's what these guys are good at. But let's push that and see if we can tell a story or do something creative that we own and we drive from scratch. So we start talking about doing shorts, and I had a bunch of guys pitch ideas. I had a couple ideas. So we're sort of generating these different things, and nothing was sort of sitting right. I wanted something, everything was kind of massive destruction and, spaceships and blah, blah, blah. I thought, right, it needs to be much simpler than that and have a bit of heart. And I thought, okay, well, let's do something funny. Visual effects is way too freaking serious business. And if you go to SIGGRAPH or you go online, you look at all these companies' reels, it's always got this sort of Inception style music, and it's always really cool, really cool and serious, and seriously cool and coolly serious, right? And that visual effects is always like that. And I thought, I could break the mold by doing something silly, right, straight away. So I was talking to Alvise. Alvise is an animator. He's an absolutely amazing creature animator. I first hired him over from uh, uh, Weta to work on John Carter, and he's what I call the trailer guy. He does always all the sexy shots. You just get him in. He's just naturally amazing, and I put him right alongside Atsushi. Okay,
Mm. Yeah,
yeah,
Sushi. Yeah, he was fantastic
he's
too.
just amazing. But he also has a kind of a cheeky Italian sense of humor that's kind of on the same plane as me, sort of pull my finger style humor. And and he said, "Oh, I have this thing that I've been doing," and he's a personal kind of journey that he wants to make. He wants to become a commercialist director in the long run, and he had done a little side project on his own, sort of a Coke versus Pepsi thing that he did all on his own time while he was animating for us, and and he had this idea, and he showed me the idea, and I'm like, "That's perfect." I love the commercial format because to me that meant there's a really strong discipline in telling stories in the commercial format. You've got a very strict sort of
Time frame.
amount of seconds to deliver your story, and
Hmm.
it makes you stick to it because the time frame, and you have to really, ditch anything that's erroneous and only support that core idea. And I love the idea, and he pitched it as a little animatic that looked like a cartoon. I thought, well, we could put, I could take this whole company and put a massive amount of production value into this and show off everything we can do. And then also he gets to animate his giant creature, which he wanted to do. Realistic astronauts, do all this kind of stuff, make it look photoreal, at least in the beginning, and then turn everybody and surprise them at the end with the gag.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that's doable in a year. We don't need a huge team. And when we talked about it, and because it was his idea, I thought, right, what you direct it, you go ahead and do that. And that's what he did, and I supported him. And I took on the role of producer because I figured, okay, I'm going to protect this. And being, I've done enough shows as a manager now I figured I'm either going to direct something or I'm going to produce something. And I thought, well, we've got the direction figured out. Um, and you didn't need two directors on that. So I thought I'll take a back seat on the creative side and let him do his thing. And I'll just make sure that we get the right resources and support it. And that's what I was able to do. So that was how it came about. It took about 6 months to deliver that. And we fit it in around a bunch of the movies. We were finishing World War Z. We were doing, what else we're doing? We're still doing Edge of Tomorrow, which is Tom Cruise movie comes out, I think, in the summer. Jack Ryan, 300, Rise of an Empire, a whole bunch of stuff, RoboCop.
Wow.
And, we're just doing this in downtime. So it took longer than it would have if it had been a dedicated project. I think start to finish, we probably could have done it in about 3 months, but it took about 6 months, and people just sort of drifted on off. What was really cool as well is I wanted to make everybody feel like they're making something that was ours, not just working on somebody else's film, but this is our film. And I know, and it's something that I miss actually from my Disney days, is feeling more involved in the creation of a story is hugely rewarding. And you don't get that as much in visual effects. I did on John Carter because I worked right next to the director, and I had a lot of say in how those characters looked and behaved in that movie. But it's not always like that in visual effects, and this was sort of important to me to get everybody in the team to feel that. So it was, we had a lot of people had creative say, certainly in their own disciplines, and everybody put their heart and soul into it and really enjoyed it and were really proud of it. And we had a great time making it. We just threw a lot of stuff at it, and we didn't come up with new technology because we didn't need to, and I didn't want to sort of waste our time and efforts doing that. I just wanted to make something that was well animated, and then put lots of stuff that we put into these films, like World War Z, just realistic, great looking production values, great effects, cool monster, realistic spacemen, all that stuff. We know we can do that, and it did, and it's made, I think, almost 7.5 million views on YouTube since it's come out. We've had all kinds of people from the advertising world calling us up saying it's the best ad for a product that doesn't exist
Oh, that's
ever.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I just love the silliness of it. I love the silly ending.
Well,
You
I,
know,
I think it being so visual effects ish, I think that's what helped the payoff at the end. You're
yeah,
expecting this, serious, like ultra seriousness, like you mentioned,
yeah.
and then with that payoff at the end, I think that's just what helps sell it.
It takes it right back to earth. And kids watch it and enjoy it. And it was tricky because it's quite violent.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the monster shows up and just, to tell the story, you needed not just to kill the astronauts, you needed to utterly destroy them. So that the last guy shows up, you get what's at stake. So, but when you do that, you have to be careful. Like he tears a guy in half and flings him away, and we wanted to make sure there's no blood or no, detritus hanging out, no kind of string of sausages hanging out from his guts.
Mortal
And
Kombat, huh?
yeah, and there was a point actually, during it, we were able to cover up a lot of it with the dust and effects, and so it still feels really violent, but it's not. I don't think it's gross. But when the guy gets ripped in half, our texture artist Nicola was saying, "Oh, I found some reference," and she showed me some really horrible stuff she found on Google. And I'm like, we can't do that. That's just, shut that down. That's not even safe for work. So Vise went away and he came back after lunch and he said, "Here, use this." And he'd found a picture of a giant plate of Italian deli meats. There was salami, pepperoni, just folded meat. It was delicious. It looked delicious. And that's what we used. We literally just took that and stuck it inside. From the distance, you can't tell. But that astronaut is made of rather delicious cured
That's funny.
prosciutto. Yeah.
I mean, it was so successful. Like the feeling that you got from that guy's fart, you knew that was really tight.
It was, and you know what? We agonized over the sound, and it's the hardest thing. But once we got the sound right, and Alvise found it, he found it at the sound effect, and we bought it and stuff. And he's like, we knew that's exactly it. It can't sound horrible. Didn't want to sound like there was too much moisture in it.
Right.
It had to sound dry, but it was more like an anxious toot, and it worked. But once we got it, everybody laughed, and that was it. But it is, you can get gross with that stuff really easily. We didn't want to do it. We want people to laugh.
It's almost like farting in church or something like that.
Just trying to hold it in.
On a wooden bench, it's like.
At my age, people have said, "Oh, was that you? You must have done that." I'm like, I'm 48, dude. I haven't tooted that high and note in years. Sound like an old wallet being opened. Or dry creek is what it is. But yeah, we had great fun doing it, and we got to work with a company called Molinaire. I have to give them a shout because we don't do sound and stuff. So we hooked up with these guys, and they gave us their services for free, and they're like, "Yeah, this is great." They wanted to get involved in something creative as well, and they have a sound engineer, and he was like, "Yeah, well, I'm not gonna." He changed every other sound we gave him. We gave him a bunch of scratch stuff. And he redid it and he accepted the fart. He said, "We're not changing that because it's absolutely perfect." Yeah, and he did. It's insane what the sound guys can do. Like all the impacts he did by flicking his finger on a piece of polystyrene packing.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And then adjusting it and, crazy. And yeah, so we had a great time doing it. And it was, it was interesting because once the animation was blocked in, right from the beginning, it never really changed. It was like we just kept forward polishing it and just tweaking it in little ways. But it was clear to what I learned about it from a story standpoint, even though there's not a lot of story there, was it's telling a joke. It's a knock-knock joke, right? When I say knock-knock, somebody says, "Who's there?" And they know immediately it's now not me just telling a story. Now you're involved in this, and you get to take part in that sort of conversation. And with this, it's almost the opposite of it. So we figure within the first 4 seconds, you have to get exactly where you are. You have to know 100% where and when you are. So you have to be on the moon, and then it's astronauts. So when they plant the flag, it's an American flag. And towards the end, we were looking at all of the astronauts have a crew badge. Mm-hmm. And all of the NASA astronauts have different crew badges, and we researched it and we made our own one. And generally, you've got the name of each member of the crew around the badge. And you can't see it in the movie, but we know our names are on every astronaut. No, it's sort of a cool little thing. And the last guy at the end has a flag that's an Italian flag, and we put that on because Alvise, the director, is Italian. Uh-huh. And everybody's saying, "Oh, it's a Chilean flag, it's the Irish flag." It's an Italian flag because the director's Italian. That's it. It doesn't mean anything more than that. But somebody said, "Oh, let's make the flag Italian." And I said, "No, you cannot do that because that changes the context of the opening of the story." And it would make people go, "What the?" And they'd focus on the flag because you've never seen anything other than the American flag on the moon.
Good point.
And there may be other ones there, but in popular culture, it has to be that flag. So we very quickly learned what to hang your hat on idea wise and visually. So the first 3 4 seconds you're on the moon has to be photoreal, and we studied thousands of pictures of reference of astronaut suits. We chose a suit that was a combination of the space shuttle suit and one of the suits from the moon, just because we liked the look of it, and they had straps on them, and we figured adding the straps gave us a little bit of overlap, which helped sell the idea of the gravity on the moon. And just for that overlap, I think sometimes need that, especially for slow motion stuff. And then we turn the story on its head. It's got to be, first of all, it's a giant space lobster. Where's that coming from?
Yeah.
And then he's destroying everybody, and you're just catching up with each of these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the camera pulls back and reveals the last guy, it's literally one pose that has to say, "I'm hiding." And then, the gag is delivered, and it's just the timing of it. And once we got it, we were like, absolutely, that's it. We didn't change it.
Yeah.
It was just finishing it and adding more and more detail. But it was great fun. And it was, it's nice to see lots of people get it. Although I'm absolutely stunned at YouTube comments like, you can't hear a fart in space. So they dislike it. Like, seriously? You're not bothered by the giant lobster behind the guy? That doesn't bother you at all? Oh, but how would that monster hear him? I'm like,
there's a monster in space. You guys get that, right?
Yeah. Oh, unbelievable.
I remember on Tin Soldier, we were talking about this. It was such a funny idea to us. Like, I mean, it seemed like a very serious, heartwarming story, about this tin soldier that falls in love with what he thought was a one-legged ballerina.
Yeah, so you got a guy with one leg. He spots a girl, and from a particular angle, it looks like she only has one leg. And he thinks, wow. Nobody mentioned it. And then puts her other leg down that he didn't see. He's disappointed. So we were laughing at this and go, this is the most twisted story we've ever seen. But nobody questioned it. It's crazy.
Right. But I remember there used to be like cartoony rats. Remember that? Like in the very beginning. Yeah. It was like, no, push the bottle, like, let's knock over the tin soldier. I mean, nobody knew where they came from, but it was just kind of funny. And then Roy Disney came in and said, no, it's got to be more serious. So they put realistic kind of cartoony rats in there,
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Crazy.
Well, you guys nailed it on the photo reel with the astronauts. I had shown this to my dad, and he actually thought they were green screened in with the monster.
Yeah. We've had a lot of people say, oh,
They're realistic astronauts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to the moon, brought a lot of green.
Now, I noticed that you also animated on this one here. It shows on the credits that you animated.
Yeah, so basically we had a team of about 8 people. Alvise, he really wanted it. It's one shot, so it made sense for him to do it, and he spent a couple of months just blocking it in, refining it. And then he wanted to focus on the monster and all the details of it. So what we did was we designed a rig that had 2 inputs to it. So it was his animation rig, which was super fast and very lean and stripped back, but it was just what he wanted. And then I worked on a muscle version of the rig. So we could have written a muscle system, but I'm not a big fan of doing that for one shot. I'd rather just do it by hand, because you can totally control it exactly the way you want. If we were doing 100 shots or 200 shots, I'd have built an automated system. So I said, all right, I'll do the muscle stuff. You focus on the performance and I'll support that, and then we'll figure out how we'll do the astronauts later. Either I'll do them with you or whatever. And he wasn't precious about it. He wanted to get everything in there, all his hooks, all his story points. And so I was able to work on muscles. He would change his animation, I could update it. 5 minutes later, I've got his animation, and I can work, and it doesn't break anything that he's doing. And in tandem, we were able to develop things. So I just supported him, really. But then at the end, we broke out each astronaut to do a cleanup pass, and we brought in the rest of the team, and they spent a few days on it and just finished that stuff off. And then we did procedural passes and cloth passes and stuff on the suits, just to sort of sweeten it before we sent it on its way. But it was just a collaboration. You kind of roll up your sleeves and do whatever it takes. But basically, what I really wanted to do was free up Alvise to spend as much time doing the monster and the storytelling as possible. So that was sort of the role I took on it. It was just support, really.
So are you still getting to animate much these days?
I don't get to animate as much. It depends on the show. The bigger the team, the more you end up sort of going from meeting to meeting. Um, Smaller shows, hopefully you get to do it, but I quite enjoy the managing of it now. I get kicks out of it. There was a while there where I didn't enjoy it, or it was hard to enjoy it because it's not as rewarding as finishing a shot and having it look great and have somebody say I love that and move on to the next one. I don't really get my kick until it's completely in the can, and that's how I do my job. But I've found ways over the years to sort of enjoy that process. So nowadays I try to look after the crew's health. That sounds weird, but I try to give them the most opportunity to do their job and what they do. And if I can do that, then my effort shows up in the end product, scene by scene, because they get to animate and do the best job they can. Keep them focused, keep them looking out for the right stuff and not noodling them on details. Anyone that's worked for me will know the way, I don't like to be the backseat driver and stuff, but I like to challenge people's ideas into what the shot is about and make sure that they're thinking about what's best for the movie. And there's different ways, and you have to kind of I'll adapt to people, and I don't expect people to change everything they do to fit me. I'll try to adapt to help get the best out of them, and I think that has worked for me over the years. And Beans is a good example of that. So Alvise needed to be just doing that monster stuff, and he needed a long time at it, and he needed to work right up to the wire. So I built everything around that to support that, and we did it. So yeah, and that's how I get my kicks, and I'm good with that.
So, Eamon, you left Disney, like it was right after Chicken Little, right? And then you
Yeah,
went back to London, right? To
that's right.
Double
I'm back
Negative,
now
was it?
about probably 8, 9 years, something like that.
Right.
Mm.
And Double Negative was the first
No,
stop, was it?
no, I went to work for EA for a little bit.
Oh,
They're just outside London, and I did about 6 months with them. I went and did a talk, and then they jumped on me and went, "Oh, can you come in um, and be our animation director?" And I said, "Yeah," and I went out, and it wasn't for me. Great company, they really looked after people, but that particular kind of work wasn't. I didn't get a reward from it, and it was too far away from where I lived, and a whole bunch of stuff that just made me feel like, you know what, I'm not too happy about it. And then I got a call from DNEG. We're looking for an animation, a head of animation for their company, and they were committed to it. Or at least that was the story back then. And so I went in, and we started with a team of 7, built it up to a team of 120
wow.
over the
Wow.
years. Yeah, I mean, most of that was in the last few years for John Carter, but what was cool about that was, I was able to pitch, scripts would come in, and, like Guillermo's Hellboy 2 came in, and we have to work on this. This guy, I don't care what he's written, I don't care what the movie is. It's a chance to work with somebody really creative. It's going to be really good for us. And they went, okay. So I was supported. So I had quite a lot of say in the projects that we did. And then, the company grew an awful lot, and animation became less important to them. So I felt, I pitched that I wanted to do feature animated films, or develop our own content at the very least. And it wasn't something they were particularly interested in. So I started looking around. Cinesite came up and said, yeah, we're really keen to broaden our horizons and try the things. And they offered me the position of head of the company, or head of the animation of the company. But I'm also a director in the company. So it was a great offer, and, I've got huge support and a great team of people that I can, do things like Beans with.
That's
No,
awesome.
it's fantastic, yeah.
Mm.
And you had this other short that you're kind of making, like on Chicken Little, to do with
Oh, the
Star
Star Trek
Trek.
thing. I've
Yeah,
still got it. Yeah, I've not come back to it yet, but I've got all that stuff. I think when the time is right, I think I'll reopen that.
it was
Um,
fantastic because for those, I mean, Eamon was a big Star Trek fan, and he does like the perfect William Shatner impression. And it was perfect.
Gatlin's long.
So we know who will voice it then, huh?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it would be probably.
Hey, real quick, speaking of double negative, when I mentioned I posted this on our site, David Hubert, he said I loved working with Eamon. He said he was my soup at double negative. So he says to say hello.
Oh yeah, we used to call him Pooh Bear. Pooh Bear. Great animator, great animator. He came in on Hellboy and did a great job. I'm really glad to see his career take off.
Yep.
Yeah, super nice guy to work with. Yeah, say hi right back.
All right, we'll do. I'm sure
Yeah.
he'll listen to this podcast. So now you also mentioned you've got some other shorts. You said Beans is Cinesite's first in-house content creation project, and I'm
Yeah.
sure it won't be our last. So have you guys got some other ones in the pipeline, or at least ideas that you think?
Well, we're going to do at least one a year, no matter
Okay.
what. I mean, we were really busy last year. A lot of stuff wrapped up just before Christmas, and now it's starting to ramp up again. But it's amazing how much you can get done when you're busy.
Mm.
So I learned a lot about how to get extra stuff out of people when they're pulling their hair out on other stuff. And um, but yeah, we're just committed to doing it. I'd like to have it animation driven, but I'm open to pushing other things into the forefront if it's creative and it's something that people get a kick out of. Um, the We have lined up a bunch of ideas. Some of them, it's for me, it's great if it tells a great story, it motivates people, but also drives us forward in other ways. So if it's driving our first system a little bit or pushing something maybe we haven't done before, if it feeds the visual effects side, great. So I've got probably 6 or 7 different ideas. I can't talk about any of them yet because we
Right.
haven't picked them. But equally, I'm starting to get in touch with really creative people, directors who are out there who are trying to pitch their own ideas,
Mm.
and we might use the resources to help them develop their movies. Just to help get money in the door to get that movie off the ground, and if it helps that director get the movie made, and when we can get something out of it in terms of developing ourselves as storytellers and as filmmakers, then great. It's all collaboration at the end of the day.
Now, is this kind of a bit of an analogy, what you guys are doing, that an animator should be doing, doing their own kind of stuff outside of maybe the studio or something along that lines? It seems to kind of push you guys both technically as well as artistically.
Yeah, I think it's always good, but artistically, I think is the key. It's always got to come first. I mean, the technical stuff, we need to do that, but again, what's the point if it's not to entertain or deliver some grander idea? Um, so I think I'd be wary of telling, particularly students, if anyone's looking to get into the business, I wouldn't focus too much on developing highly rendered and effects driven stuff. Just tell your story in the simplest way, in the clearest way possible. I even say don't even bother lighting it. Play gray shaded play blast is fine if it communicates an idea, but keep it clear and simple and stage it well so I get it. Um, and I think if you're pushing yourself, you're in the industry. I think I find developing complementary skills like drawing, painting, photography, filmmaking. Those are great things to have because they challenge the way you look at stuff. And storytelling in filmmaking is really really difficult to do. Um, And I think if you're going to do a piece of animation for yourself, then yeah, why not make a short film? Beans was actually the story of it was really just about the timing, getting the timing right. But all the things that happened in that movie, relatively straightforward to figure out. We kept it as a single camera because it made the most sense. It was a little trickier to do that way because you couldn't split the work up, um, but we just committed to it and then followed through and just added lots of cool stuff. But there's so many cheats in that film as well, things you'll never know. Like there's only muscles facing the camera. We didn't act, and anything that you can't see that's facing away.
Mm.
The background is a photograph, a high resolution photograph of the moon with foreground that was modeled. It's displaced stuff. We've got 5 or 6 different particle passes, and then we hand animated larger rocks because they didn't feel big enough. But we also wanted to kind of draw your eye to certain areas, and we found that effects are just very very hard to art direct. You can do it, but it just takes a long time, and we didn't have a lot of time, so we just covered stuff up with hand animated rocks and bits and bobs just to either distract you or draw your eye into the right place.
Nice.
Um, yeah, little things like that, just tricks to keep you focused on what you should be looking at. And there's
Right.
errors all over the place that in the end that we kind of either paint fixed or covered up in different ways, but that just happens. Um, yeah, so it's sleight of hand. It's just like a good magician doing a street card trick. He's making you look at the hand that's not holding the card. Well, the other hand's doing something that doing the magic stuff.
Hmm.
Um, Misdirection, you might call it that, whatever. But filmmaking and storytelling is exactly the same thing. It's just manipulation, but you're using visuals, you're using audio, you're using story points, using the edit itself and the juxtaposition of shots to make you think a certain way or feel a certain way. It's quite complicated. It's really like juggling with a lot of stuff in the air. And that's quite a challenge. And if you can master that, then you can add, I think, a lot more sophistication. It just develops your storytelling
Right.
as an artist. But I think just focusing on animation is a mistake. Do other things. It broadens your horizons, broadens your scope, changes the way you look at stuff, and challenges the way you work.
Yeah,
Good
I
stuff.
know from Jason's demos that he does weekly. I mean, here's a guy who animates all day in the studios, but still at the Friday loves to animate. And it's I know he's mentioned before that's because it's his own stuff. He gets to kind of be
Yeah,
creative in that realm.
But
yeah,
also, I mean, it serves another purpose as well, because like in the studios, you don't really get to pick the shots that you animate.
that's
You're
right.
kind of given the shots, so it may not be pushing you creatively, like Eamon's talking about. So I like to do shots that I'm not able to do in the studios,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
whether it's like
absolutely.
a really subtle acting shot that I'm doing now, I don't really get to do a lot of those in the studios. They might throw like a ton of crowd action shots, that I've got to
Yeah,
choreograph or dance or whatever it is, so this really helps, like for any professional or anybody doing anything, like always try and push yourself creatively, you
yeah.
know.
Doing the things that you haven't done. I mean, it's great, good for your career in general. Just show some range, try different things, try different styles. It's a
Hmm.
very good thing to do. I think, though, to that point as well, it's Jason's unusual. He's the Terminator of animation. He really is. He'll keep going on it, but not everybody, has that the bottomless well of passion that he has
Yeah.
for animation. And sometimes it's good. I think if you feel tired or weary of it, or you're down on it, go do something else creative because it all adds to the same pool of skills.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
I think in visual effects in particular, actually, I think it's probably the same in cartoon animation or feature animation. Is half of the battle is like knowing how to look at something, like look at a piece of reference and take it apart in your head, and only pull out the things that are important. And that's a skill that takes years, I think, to develop. And it's a really good thing to have because I'm always telling people just use reference, start with reference. It's a good place to start. Don't just make it up. If you make it up, you'll won't always, you'll it might lead you down a bad path, and you'd be surprised at how much sophistication there is in the real world, or how challenged you'll be by an idea when you see it for real. And particularly in VFX, where it's supposed to be more photoreal and feel more naturalistic. So we always start with stuff like that. And people are lazy and they don't do it, and they always regret it. And the people that use the reference, you know, but know how to take it apart and know how to pull the right idea out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you
That's
don't have to be a slave to the live action
no,
reference, but like you're pulling like the essential elements that really kind of give it that spirit, right? The energy.
exactly. But I think it does take real skill to know how to take something apart and go, all this other stuff doesn't matter. There's no entertainment value in it. It might look kind of interesting, but it doesn't add to the idea. But this line of action does, or the way he drags his feet here, or little things like that add to the emotional need in your story, or whatever it is you're trying to tell. But being able to dissect something is really that's a skill.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have
Definitely.
it.
Yeah, no,
It
don't. I mean, don't
takes
sell
years.
yourself short either. Yeah.
It takes years.
Now, having worked in high-end feature film, what are you enjoying about visual effects, and what do you feel like are the struggles for you?
Um, that's a great question. I think one of the things I enjoy is the quicker turnaround. So in the last year, we've done, RoboCop, for example, we came in quite late on that just to help them out, and it was really just a few weeks, but it was cool to be a part of something.
I actually just saw the preview for that
Hmm.
last night. I went to see American Hustle, and the
Yeah, oh yeah,
preview for RoboCop. It looked cool. Look, wow, look at that.
Hmm.
the director's really cool. Yeah, we didn't get to see any of the screenings of the film, so that's the downside of it. Sometimes in effects, you don't really feel like you get to see the whole film. Whereas when you work in feature, for example, you're always kept up to date with the movie and you
Yeah.
know where you stand. Um, but in visual effects, when you're a service facility, you don't get shown the whole thing. You get shown piecemeal. So I do miss that aspect of it. On some films, you get really close to the director, like John Carter. I was on set, and we're right in at the beginning. We're designing, we're building everything, and then right till the end. I was sort of first on, last off, and had quite a strong say in that movie or in the animation of it. And it felt like an animated film. It felt exactly like I was back at Disney. So that was great. And other films I don't really get a strong connection with, but the quick turnaround is nice because you get to try something and then it's over quickly. And no matter how hard it is, you never kind of lose your passion for it. The energy is always high, and you finish with energy, and then you're on to the next thing. So that's kind of nice. Sometimes features can go on a long time. And I think Chicken Little was, for me, it was 4.5 years.
Yeah.
A long time. That is a long, long time. I mean, after 2 years, you're kind of making excuses up to show up now. It's like, it's going to be good today. It's going to be different, as well.
That was
Now,
crazy because like the story changed like after
it
we were already
changed, yeah.
in production.
And that is really challenging to keep your the bowl of passion juice going. That's a
Yeah.
tough one. But it was great. I mean, the team was great and everybody was awesome. It's just the length of the show was draining.
That was also challenging because remember you came up with the animation boot camp,
Yeah,
to train sort of like 2D animators to try and get into CG.
that's right. We did that. I did that for 18 months.
Wow.
They wanted to take all the 2D guys and invest in them and give them an opportunity to become CG animators. And a lot of them made it over. But I set that, drove that basically and taught a lot of those guys. And that was cool, rewarding, but that's a long time that you're not making a film. And it's a different sort of reward with that than working on a show. But it worked out well. A lot of the guys came across and did a good job. And the movie looked cool. So
What are some of the challenges you find in VFX?
in visual effects, sometimes, like, we had a meeting the other day. I can't say what the movie is or who the director is or anything, but we get a lot of people in the industry saying, the director doesn't like CG. And yet, there's no freaking way they can make this movie without CG, right? It's set in space or on this other world, and it's all this thing. I'm like, well, frankly, I don't
That's a
care.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not anymore. I don't. You can't say that anymore. What they're saying is, I don't like bad CG. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
But every movie has CG in it. People don't even realize what's going on. Every single movie, even the cheap ones, have CG. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and the quality of CG overall is shot through the roof now. You think about CG feature animated films that are being made, for a little or no money, they're getting better and better. It's only a question of time before the market's flooded with stuff. But it really annoys me when people go, oh, I don't really like CG. Well, don't do it then. Don't use it. Do it practically. Build that set. I'd like to see you do it. But so there's that. And sometimes you have to tailor your approach to something to one person's ability or inability to understand the technology or their trust with it. And that's quite difficult. Other times it can be inspiring and difficult. Like, Christopher Nolan, for example, he wasn't a fan of CG and he'd like to shoot things practically, but he would shoot them practically. And I think his films are better for it. So that, I think it was a Batman movie where there's a truck that upends in the middle of the street and flips right out. He did that for real. And it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And he could have done it in CG, but the fact is he's committed and he will make his film less visually extravagant if it means he can shoot it for real. And I think that's why his films look cool. And he does use CG sparingly. But, equally there's people that come in and go, oh, yeah, but I want an army of, 500,000 soldiers on the beach, but I don't really like CG. Okay. Well, let's, call up your friends, call up everybody you know, let's get it down to the beach. It's going to be a long day. But yeah, there's a lot of that. So, and then sometimes there's a push on a film. Again, I'll talk about another film where somebody came in and said, okay, we're going to do this film. How would you do this? I want to create these little tiny people. How would you do it? I'm like, well, I do it like this. And I typically would push for a less technical way to do it because I've always found that technical approaches mean there's a chunky budget that just will not show up on screen. And if you've got less than a certain amount of money, so Paul, for example, we did a film called Paul with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and they didn't have much money, but they had this really cool script about this alien voiced by Seth Rogen. I said, let's animate it. And they're like, well, what about motion capture? I'm like, that's fine, but what if your actor isn't around in 6 months and you want to reshoot something? You're making a comedy. You're going to need to edit this as you go along, and you want to tweak it and dial it in. I said, I'll keep the animators around. You can keep firing it back to them. They'll work up those shots for you. But mocap is really, really expensive to go back, redo it. It has to go all the way back through the pipeline. And it's an abstract. it's not apples to apples. You're not taking a digital person and making a copy of them. You're making a version of them that looks shorter, bigger head, different face. That means you need an artist to interpret that. So you're always going to need the animator, always. And Simon was really open to it. He said, "Yeah, I don't want to do a green screen. I want to shoot quickly on set with a stand-in or somebody feeding me lines." He said because he just come back from Tintin, where he'd done a lot of mocap, and he said it was really the movie was cool. He said, but it's really uninvolving for him as an animator or as an actor because he shows up on a green set, so there's nothing to react to. He doesn't know where he is. It's green. It's a green warehouse, and he said everybody's kind of not excited by it. He said when you're on set for real set, and places on fire or whatever it is, you get a reaction from that. And he told me a story about a scene in Hot Fuzz. I don't know if you've seen that movie or not, but in the end of it, he faces the villains in the movie, and he's in a room, or no, sorry, he's outdoors, and he runs up, and there's a shot looking at him. And then there's a shot looking at this table full of people in kind of gowns. I'm giving the movie away here, but he said when they shot all of the actors, and they shot his reverses, the shots on him the next night, they let the actors go, and they said they brought in some amateur dramatics people who weren't very good to read the lines, so that he could react to it. And he said that's the performance I hate. That's my worst performance because of the quality of the actors that were reading back to me. They weren't as strong as it's all about reaction. If they'd had the real actors there, I would have been more in the zone. And frankly, I look at it, I think he did a great job one way or the other. But he was less. I learned a lot about that actually, about not letting technology get in the way on the set. Let the actors do what they need to do, and get out of their way, and then deal with the technology bit separately. So John Carter was like that. We talked about doing on-set mocap and all this really cool cutting edge stuff that would have gotten us into SIGGRAPH and Cinefex and all this other cool stuff. But if it gets in the way of the actor doing his thing, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. You want the actor to do it, capture that on film, and then that's what you're going to reference. And that's exactly the way we did it. And luckily, Andrew Stanton, he understood that. He completely understood it. And I just basically kind of stepped out of his way. We would talk about if something was going to work or not, or where we're going to put the darks. But because he was an animator himself, he was able to make informed decisions and move forward really quickly. But we just tried to keep a very light footprint on set on that movie, and it worked out great. So yeah, I'm less in favor of technology. It's good if you're doing lots of big stuff, but I find from an animation standpoint, it can get in the way. That's where the frustration comes for me sometimes.
What about working with directors in VFX? I know that's kind of been an issue sometimes in feature film. If you've got a director who's had some animation background, it's a little bit easier to work with them. They can understand seeing things in stepped and stuff.
The biggest issue is a live action director. Almost all of them are not used to seeing things gray shaded or stepped, and they can't give you a reaction to it. And we had that on Paul with the editor, not so much the director, but they would get distracted by poses, and it's tough. And you just have to either do it or educate them. But at the end of the day, you generally have to do it in a way that makes it easier for them to see. And it's tough because the very thing you want your animator to do, you can't do. So they can't work rough anymore. They have to polish before they show anything. So they start getting really committed, and it's difficult then to get them to throw something away and do it over. And the way you spend your time is different. So the workflow, you kind of have to adapt it, and it's a challenge. It really is.
The more time you spend on something, the more possessive you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I try to do my 2D quick pass, because I'm not going to get possessive over something that I spent 20 seconds on. You're just going to go, no, that doesn't work. All right, toss it, And that way you can really explore different avenues of acting or performance or mechanics or whatever it is that you're doing, relatively quickly. Even if you're not an artist, like you can draw like a line of action. You can draw a line. You don't have to use a ruler, you can just draw a line, and you can still kind of get something from that, whether it's timing or performance or even acting, But I mean, I've had that before with some directors where they won't like looking at like an animator's visual reference because they say, well, you don't look like the character, and that's fair enough,
Yeah.
But like it just kind of takes us longer to do the shots then because, you have to kind of show like a final pass sort of thing as you're blocking, because
Yeah,
that's the first time they're going to react to the shot.
much tougher. Yeah. The other thing that's frustrating in visual effects is you don't always get access to the director. Sometimes you'll get to work in a movie and you'll go through a producer and a visual effects supervisor who are not animators either. But the ideas always get watered down, always, when you do that. It's very rare that you meet somebody who will retain exactly what the director wants and communicate that exactly. It's just physically, I think, humanly impossible to do that. Everybody puts their own flavor on something. And that could be frustrating. Now, with Andrew, it was great because he wanted to meet the animators. He wanted to talk directly to them. And a lot of the visual effects guys, I made that happen. When he was on Cinesite from San Francisco, we would put the animator's name up. I'd make all the animators sit in the front row. I'd sit in the back, and then he would talk to them directly, and they would freak out. So we're used to it from working in visual effects. They were like, "Oh, he's talking to me directly." And then they got used to it. It was great. But that's exactly what Andrew wanted. He brought me over to Pixar, and they were finishing Toy Story 3. And we sat in dailies, and he said, "I want it to be like this." I'm like, "Oh, I get it. This is exactly the same way Disney worked. It's just dailies. You come in, you talk to your director, and you take your notes, and you move on." And I got it. But in visual effects, they don't operate like that. It's usually, you're 2 or 3 steps removed from the creative voice, which is sometimes works great. Sometimes it's a disadvantage, but it's a gap, and I'm not fond of the gap. I like to keep that close, so you can get to the heart of the story and what's really needed.
How did your team enjoy working on Beans then, which would have been much different process, right?
Well, it was great because it was just you could go up to Alvise or myself anytime, any day of the week, and we would just talk about what was needed, and that was it. There was nobody getting in between that, But equally, we had guys come in and going, "I had this idea," and I was like, "Brilliant, great, let's put it in." So there was lots of stuff that people added to it that came from them, that was creative, and it was really key to me to make sure that was the case. We didn't want it to feel sort of exclusive, So it was great, and it was refreshing, and we got exactly what we wanted, and more actually.
Well, we're definitely looking for more shorts from you guys.
Good. I'm glad people liked it.
Yeah.
We've been blown away by the response, and it's been really great for everyone in management at the company too, because it's helped put us on the map when people hadn't thought of Cinesite as a company that could do this kind of thing. And it's got people talking. So hopefully it leads to some bigger things, and fingers crossed. But yeah, we're definitely going to do one of these every year at least, or more if we can. We just got to find a way to fund it. But yeah, it was great fun to do.
All right. Well, if you ever need any more animators, you know where to get the pull from, right?
Absolutely. Actually, I've been really, really impressed with all the guys coming from iAnimate. Some of the best acting, and I'm a huge fan of Jay and his workflow, and I know they're getting the best of tuition out there, and it's definitely one of the strongest schools providing worldwide talent pools, which is awesome. And I always keep an eye out. So whenever anyone's reel shows up with iAnimate on it, I always open that. Goes to the top of my list.
All right.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Eamonn. That's
hey, no problem, man. It's the truth.
Hey, Eamonn, we really do appreciate your time, and this is probably the most laughter I've had this early in the morning, so I do
Well, good, I'm glad. It was great fun. Thanks very much, Larry, for setting it up. And Jay, have a great winter in California. Not that you get one over there. It's not like I'm getting. It's dark here now. You know that. It's like 5:30, it's pitch dark, it's freezing, it's raining.
Oh.